Mondays with Monsignor Pope, here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and very excited for Mondays with Monsignor Charles Pope. Now, Monsignor, good morning, first of all. And I don't know if you heard earlier with Debbie, but she was asking a question. Maybe I should ask you, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, but why isn't today the Annunciation of the Lord a holy day of obligation? Do you know?
I'm pretty clueless on that, too. I think I'm in the same school it ought to be, huh? I mean,
That's okay.
It's really, especially in this age, where we are so dubious, I mean, not we personally, but I mean, culturally so dubious of life beginning at conception and treating it such. So I don't know. It ought to be,
Agreed. Well, anyways, I know we have a very important topic. After Christ rose from the dead, he appeared to his disciples, but did not stay with them continuously. Maybe, give us some more expansion on that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is on the first day, the resurrection day, there's over 6 appearances if you add them all up. And then, as you might have saw in yesterday's gospel at Mass, it says 8 days later, or after 8 days, he appeared to them again. It's like, whoa. Now, does that absolutely mean he didn't appear to them or wasn't with them continuously? John says in the gospel, hey, not everything is written down here and so on. Yeah, that's possible. But the text does seem to imply that he was with them on again, off again. After 8 days, strongly implies he wasn't present all those 8 days. So why do you have a flurry of, apparitions on the first day and then a whole gap? And then he appears again on the 8th day and a few more times. So why? And we're left to speculate, but I think we certainly have the good master, St. Thomas Aquinas, to give us some clues. I'll just read here from the Summa and part 3 and question 55. It says, now concerning the resurrection, 2 things had to be manifest to the disciples, namely the truth of the resurrection and the glory of him who rose. Now, in order to manifest the truth of the resurrection, it sufficed for him to appear several times before them and speak familiarly with them and eat and drink and let them touch him. But in order to manifest the glory of the risen Christ, he was not desirous of living with them constantly as he had done before, lest it might seem that he rose to the same life as before. For as Bede says in the same place, he has risen. He had then risen in the same flesh, but was not in the same state of mortality as they. Now, goes on to say once again that Thomas says that Christ did not deem it expedient to be, he deemed it more expedient to be elsewhere. We can talk about the elsewhere in a minute. But again, the main thing was he wants to manifest not just his resurrection, but his glory. He's not simply the same as he was before. There were times when he would sort of disappear for prayer, but they sort of knew where he was, Whereas now he kind of comes and goes. He appears and disappears. And this, again, as Thomas suggests, is to show them his resurrection, but also to show them his glory. And I would add a third reason, Keith. I would say, look, I think he wanted to also accompany or accustom them to the fact that he wasn't going to be with them in the same way. He's trying to lead them out of the daily with them all the time, every day, to a to a more spiritual awareness and presence where they'll see him in the sacraments and so on. You might remember that they recognized in the disciples in the breaking of the bread, as if Christ were saying to him, you will no longer see me in the ways you have before, but now you'll see me in the sacraments and in the liturgy. See, so again, these are the things which I think, Thomas lays before us. And I just sort of add that third part, which is that I think he was trying to accustom them to a new way that he'll relate to them spiritually as God and Lord. So,
yeah, interesting. I'm trying to think of, obviously this happened a very long time ago and they were with him all the time, and going from that to just these little snippets had to have been very challenging. Whereas we see it and we know the whole story, and so it probably doesn't affect us until we actually think about it. which is very important, I think.
Yeah. And the other thing too is it's interesting how I'm reading into the text a little bit, but it seems to me that Peter struggled with this a good bit, and Peter was often the one who struggled with things. Good for him, because he's like us, and Peter had seen him arguably 4 times, and then Peter finally just kind of, I guess he gets exasperated, and it just says in the text, he says, Peter says, "I'm going fishing." And not just fishing, but I'm going back to fishing. I don't get all this. He's alive, and he appears, he disappears. He's here, he's not here. He's got something he got us to do, and I don't understand all this, but I do understand fishing. So I'm going back to fishing. And that was a test. And then so the Lord stood on the shore, and up in Galilee, and once again redid the whole call all over again. He said, "Get away from that boat, come over here. I got something more for you to do." So I think that, the Lord, well, doesn't the Lord understand that Peter might struggle? Yeah, he does. The point is, the Lord does intend for us to struggle a bit, to work through things. If everything were easy, well, but because things aren't easy, we struggle, and sometimes we respect them more. If something's easy peasy, I can do that on the back of an envelope. You just sort of blow it off to the last minute. But if something's hard and difficult and you're trying to work through it, it stays before you. So there's a lot of good psychology, I think, in what the Lord is doing, in this appearing and not being with them constantly. Now, yet another theory I have, if I could, I always lose track of our time, but anyway, okay, we got a few minutes, according to our fearless producer. All right. So I think also, although Thomas doesn't deal with this, I think, frankly, the Lord was going back and forth to Sheol. We do know that on Holy or Good Friday, he dies and he goes down among the dead. And it says in 1 Peter that he preached the gospel to them there. He woke them up, so to speak. He went to Adam and Eve and said to them, "I who am your God, for your sake have become your son. Arise now and let Christ give you light." And he woke them up, so to speak, from the dead, all of the dead who were waiting for him, and in Sheol, and he preached the gospel. Well, of course, that's very compressed in time. It's, what is it? 36 hours or so, so it's quite possible to me, as a speculation, and that's all it is, that he was going back and forth to the folks in Sheol and continuing this work of preaching and preparing them for the ascension. We do know that at the Feast of the Ascension, it says that when Christ ascended, that he led with him a host of captives. In other words, an army of those who had been captive. And he led them to heaven. And in other words, the souls out of Sheol into the heavenly glory with him. And so this is another, I think, speculation that I have, that perhaps during this time he was, shall we say, busy about things. He wasn't just taking his repose.
Right. We do have a question from our YouTube stream. Why could St. Thomas touch Jesus, but St. Mary Magdalene was told not to?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think there's a kind of a classical error that happened in one of the translations that occurred, I think, in the 1950s. It could be wrong. I don't want to be, but it might have been the Douay Challoner version. It says, don't touch me. I've not yet ascended. Whereas the Greek is more like, don't go on touching me or clinging to me, holding on to me. In other words, she was just all over him, hugging him, Rabboni, Rabboni. And he says to her, basically, don't go on clinging. I have something for you to do. Look, step back, and take another look at me. And what's interesting about that, and again, I read into the text, but of course, I don't know, Keith, if you notice, I do a lot of that because I'm a preacher. And you're thinking, helpful. What might be, what's something you can draw from this? And so again, some of this is speculative on my part, but he says, Mary, step back. I have something for you to do, in other words. So don't go on clinging to me. Step back, take a look at me now, and go tell my brothers what you've seen. And when she goes to the disciples, she says, I have seen. She doesn't say I saw Jesus. I didn't see Rabboni, or the rabbi, the teacher. I have seen the Lord. I have seen the Lord. And that really is what Resurrection Sunday is about. Not that a corpse has been resuscitated; it has, but it's been glorified. Of course, his human body, even as well as his body has been glorified. But that said, there is the capacity to see something different about Jesus now, to really perceive that not just that he's Jesus, he's teacher, he's rabbi, he is all those things, and not simply that he has risen, he certainly has, but that he is the Lord. Okay, I have seen the Lord. And there are all of these resurrection accounts. Think about it this way, Keith. We think of something, we sometimes just say, oh, it finally dawned on me that blank, fill in the blank. And for us, that's really not what dawn is. We're thinking of dawn like a light coming on, like an electric light, pop, pop, but that's not how dawn works, is it? Dawn is a very light sliver of light on the horizon, and it gets a little bit brighter, and it comes, and all of those things, and little by little the light builds in, and the darkness goes away. And so all the early resurrection accounts say that it was very early in the morning when it was still dark. This is not just some kind of temporal thing. This is telling us it was dark. And little by little, the light begins to come on for them. And that, I think, is what resurrection is like. And the Lord is trying to teach them and lead them gently. So he appears, and then he disappears. He wants them to work through this on their own terms. And so I think there's a lot of beauty in these resurrection accounts.
Yeah. And
They're
all
very
things
human.
Yeah. And thanks to you, Monsignor Charles Pope, for helping us peel back those layers that we, normal lady would never get to see. So thank you so much for always spending your Monday mornings with us, Monsignor Charles Pope. Could you give us a quick final blessing before we move on?
Pax benedictio Dei omnipotentis, Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et maneat semper. Amen. And viva la Virgen.
Amen. Thank you so much once again, Monsignor Charles Pope. We can catch you always on A Life Lived Joyfully, weekdays at 4 p.m. on the Guadalupe Radio Network as well. But this is the end of our first hour. So for those listening on Catholic Spirit Radio and Aquinas Communications, our friends over there, thank you so much for joining us. Always catch us on GRN Online on our YouTube channel for more Morning Joy, for more GRN in general. But there's more coming up next, though. If you're staying with us, we're talking with Father John Paul Mary, chaplain of EWTN, and more in our After Show Clubhouse. So stay tuned for that after this quick break, and we'll see you with more Morning Joy, where truth matters. We'll see you right after this break.
This has been Morning Joy, where truth matters, hosted by Keith Downey. Take some joy with you today. Visit grnonline.com/joy to listen again, share a segment, or answer the question of the day. That's grnonline.com/joy.